So we're starting with the discussion of crime and social control. The first major concept difference is deviance and crime, the difference between deviance and crime. But let me say this in this way. So sociologists, we study contexts. So when we look at the contexts, then how do we see crime and deviance? There are two ways we look at this. One is we see evil in contexts, so we use the social construction of reality perspective to look at crime and deviance. I'll explain this more later on, but basically I would say this, as sociologists, we tend to focus less on the harmfulness of a particular behavior, how much it damages you, okay? How gross it is, how bloody it is. We're less likely to focus on that from the sociological perspective. They are more likely to treat crime and deviance as a label. Okay, I know this is tough. Okay, you can strongly disagree, but let's just see what they're from their eyes. What do they see? Okay, they see mostly there are two ways to see this. One is basically why this behavior and that behavior seem to have the same consequence, but one is labeled as deviant or crime, the other one is not. Right. So we are less likely to focus on how much harm it inflicts, but we're more likely to focus on how the label was applied in the first place, the process through which the label was applied. Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, about analytically, we treat evil as a label. Okay, if there's anything in sociology that's more controversial, but I think it's in my mind is very important to learn, is morality is most often negotiated. Okay? There's seldom a situation where there's pure black and white, right and wrong. We argue right and wrong are often negotiated by people through power struggles between interest groups, okay, etc. And so that's one thing. You look at evil in contexts. You look at how labels created, applied. Second, now if I just take government definition of crime for granted, okay, I don't want to study, let's say I don't want to study why this thing is called crime, the other thing is not called crime. Excuse me. Then how do sociologists go about it? Okay, that's sociology. Let's say I just want to know. I just want to control crime. I don't care. Just whatever government defines as crime, then this is crime. Okay, I'll just start from there. Okay. Now, if that's the case, then as sociologists, we look for the social roots of crime, rather than the psychological roots of crime, etc. Okay. So we look at the individual or the group's likelihood to commit crimes and how social contexts play a role. Okay, so that's the two major perspectives within sociology. Okay, so I'm going to go through the first one. If you are a little bit hazy about this, don't worry, it will become clearer, I think. Okay, so the first question I usually raise is this: think about any behavior. Open your mind to any behavior that's so dark, so disturbing, so gross. Can you think about any such behavior that you can recognize it without any social context? Okay, so what I mean is, can you think about behavior regardless of who did what to whom at what time and place? Can you think about such a behavior that's universally condemned, regardless of time and space, regardless of its social, historical, political, and cultural context? I honestly, if you're able to raise one, please let me know. I have difficulty coming up, to be honest with you. Okay, it's challenging, it's scary. It's scary because it does make you begin to think, oh my goodness, are there, it's Colin teaching nihilism. pretty much there's no morals. Okay, that's not the purpose, but I do want to challenge a little bit. Now, we all know social customs differ. Okay, so let's say in America, people usually tip. In Europe, I don't know if Europe do this, but at least in many Asian countries, there's no such thing as tipping. Right, that's not a deal. I don't know if anybody from Korea or something. I know in China, I know we don't have tipping custom. Yeah, so countries have different. Japan doesn't have tipping custom as far as I know. Okay, so those were everybody understanding. So if you don't tip in the US, it's deviant, right? People have negative reactions. If you tip in the Japan, you'll be a deviance because people have different expectations, right? That's easy to understand. But what about serious things like murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, child abuse? How can you say that's not universally condemned? I would say this way: every culture has laws against those behaviors. That's true. Okay, but those behaviors, what counts as those behaviors, often varies a lot. Right? So I'm just going to, if you think of one, let me know. Okay, challenge me as much as you can. Maybe it's put on the spot. I just don't know how to answer. Okay. In my mind, for example, murder. Okay. Well, I don't know. Japan has a cadet program. Does Japan have cadet program? Soldiers. Soldiers are trained to kill. Right? Especially that's their job, to train to kill. And in Florida and some other places, you have self-defense killing. Right? If a woman has been abused for a long time, and suddenly one day she snapped and she killed. Right? And especially, honestly, when women snap, when they kill, often the killing is fatal because if you don't have a lot of upper body strength, you need to use a gun. Okay, it's just right away and it. Okay, it's not like men, you can wrestle with each other, right? So, exactly, so justified killing, unjustified killing, right? So again, it depends on who's doing what to who. So, but just looking at murder itself, I have no idea it's good or bad until I know the context. Yeah. Rape is difficult to say, okay, but I just want to give you one example. I don't know if I gave you this before, okay. This is definition of rape in the US, okay. Actually, it changed right when I was in college. Before 2013, the definition of forcible rape is the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly against her will, okay. And after 2013, they changed the definition. First of all, the term forcible has been crossed out. Okay. Secondly, I'm not going to read all of this, it's too graphic. Okay, but at least it's another person, no longer female. In other words, this time the definition of rape would include male, including homosexual relationships, for example. So in other words, the who can be the rape victim has changed from simply female to any person, right? And also not only the detailed discussion of the acts, but also without consent of the victim. It's very clear in a sense, as long as, let's say, the person drinking a little bit too much or under the influence of drugs, whatever, as long as the person didn't give you the consent, that's rape. So far, so that's the definition has been changing. What that means is if you're a social science researcher, you want to study the pattern, the change of rape, going up and down rates-wise occurrences in the US, will be difficult because the definition has changed, right? But definition change, the number may change, and you thought you thought the occurrences has been rising when actually it's definition change. So far, okay. So a lot of these have to do with, I'm just saying it's a social construction, okay. But now, don't take me wrong. When we say social construction, it doesn't mean something is not important. Of course, it's important, but they're hard. Okay, but by saying the social construction, will force us to look at behind the label. Why, for example, you asked the question, why does this definition change in 2013? Okay? Why didn't it change earlier? Why didn't it change late? Right, and that's the question you force you to ask. Right, and so And how about theft? Stealing, first of all, I think stealing may have assuming the notion of private property. This is mine, not yours, right? If you are in a group like traditional, not today, but I don't think today, traditional Native American groups, it's communal ownership, right? When it's communal ownership, it means everybody owns it. Every individual has the right to use it, but it belongs to the whole group. So each individual cannot sell it, right? In other words. So if you don't have that strong sense of, private property, then theft and stealing can be an issue difficult to define. Before me so far, that's why I don't get me wrong, don't get offended. Okay? There's used to be a term people say Indian giving, and you've ever heard before. Okay? You give it to me, why you take it away, right? The understanding goes. But the key thing is the allegation rests on the assumption that there's a private property. Right, you give it to me, now it's mine, no longer yours. There's no notion. Okay. If a community does not have a notion, then the issue is got pretty much. Right? And it also depends on honestly who's stealing from who. Frankly, I mean, tax season is coming up. Most of us pay taxes. Some super rich may not pay taxes. So in a sense, the super rich is stealing. Honestly, frankly, but people don't think that way. Okay, and if you think people stealing secrets from US or whatever, I'll be honest with you, I don't need to defend any bad behavior. But what's CIA for? The Central Intelligence Agency. The whole agency is designed to spy, right? What's the definition of spy? Actually, it is stealing, right? Stealing other countries' secrets. I mean, it's the whole thing, right? So again, the point here is it depends on context, who's doing what for whom. And it, don't even get to the start of terrorism, exactly how to find terrorists. To get in the mind blow. So difficult. Anybody think of anything that's so gross, so bad, universally condemned? How about carnivalism? You know what I mean? Eating other people's flesh. I have a dark mind. Even that, it is hard to say. Anybody know there's there's actual incident. They made a movie out of it. There's a plane crash in Andes Mountains. Anybody know that? Yeah, there's a plane crash in Andes Mountains, and then it's a winter, it's all frozen, and the people who want to survive find out their friends who seem to be healthy, and then they ate to be able to survive. They came back celebrated as a human spirit of survival. So again, it depends. It depends on the situation. The only thing, to be honest with you, I can think about probably universal, almost, would be incest taboo. In other words, mother and son, father and daughter. That seems to be, I have difficulty coming up with a culture that really allow that. That's the only one. I don't know whether but even if once you're beyond that, it will be very difficult. I don't know if anybody know this. Albert Einstein and who else? Charles Darwin's. Google it. They both married either their first or second cousin. Okay. And also, where do you draw the line? First cousin, second cousin, third cousin, right? And I don't get it so far, but it's. But I would have to say I have difficulty think about a culture really that allows mother and son, father and daughter. Permit that, I would have difficulty think of one. So that's the only one I can think of, frankly, at this point. Okay. But even incest, again, beyond that unique circle, the line is really tricky. And honestly, if you think about your own Bible, I didn't mean to be, you think about it, who cannot have a relationship with whom? Anyway, I'll give you. I think I read something like that. I'll give it to you later on. It's interesting, but basically they have different. Basically, the ones the Bible really do not allow you to have a relationship with in the Old Testament is more about relationships that actually do not have gene. Because if people think you have incest, you will have genetic problems, right? You have people have too close together, they have maximized the mistakes, right? But the one that I think the Bible permits or forbids is just the opposite. Yeah, but I will show you later on. I don't want to waste too much time on this. Okay. Anyway, so we're saying it's contextual. Okay. Definition keep on changing. Same behavior, different reactions. This is cliche example: marijuana versus alcohol, right? I think arguably you can argue alcohol is more damaging, but even if I make a step back, I still can say the two are equally harmful. Then one is legal, the other is illegal, right? At least in Wisconsin. Right? So again, similar consequence, but different reactions. Why? Right? Again, those were the sociological perspectives. That's about acts. Okay, what do you do? But sometimes, I want to say this as well. Deviance can be a person or people. So this is this guy's name is Henry Anslinger. She is the first drug czar in the U.S. Okay, to control illegal drugs. Okay, in 1930s. So he's trying to make imagine you are Henry Anslinger. You want to control marijuana. You want to make marijuana illegal. Before that time, it was pretty much legal. Okay, you want to make it illegal. How do you convince the people in Congress? You testify, right? You try to convince them that you should ban this. How do you do that? You have two ways. One way is tell them how bad this is for the person's health, right? You can always say that the chemical reactions, whatever. Okay, give all the signs in there. But frankly, vast majority of people don't care about science that much. Okay? People don't have patience reading through the papers. Okay. However, your argument will be much powerful if you can conjure up in the listener's mind an image of not only marijuana, but the people who use marijuana. If the people who use marijuana in your mind is a negative person, then your argument began to connect with people. You cause emotional reactions. Okay. So this is what he wrote. This is what he said. Okay, I've copied down from the testimony. Marijuana is taken by musicians. And I'm not speaking about good musicians, but the jazz type in 1920s, 1930s. I wish I could show you what a small marijuana cigarette can do to one of our degenerate Spanish-speaking residents. That's why our problem is so great. The greatest percentage of our population is composed of Spanish-speaking persons, most of whom are low mentally and because of social and racial conditions. So in other words, you're trying to make sure your argument is persuasive. You're trying to ban the thing not by simply focusing on the chemical health as medical aspect, you also focus on the social aspect. Okay. The same thing, I'll be honest with you, if they have a research on this. Okay. At the time when America was trying to do censorship, ban pornography, for example, okay, in the early days, 1920, I believe 1940s. Okay. There's a huge debate about what about people who show the art, nude paintings in art museums, okay, which is pornography, which is not. Okay. So basically the issue here is if you begin to think most people who watch those nude paintings are people like Bill Gates or professors, okay, then suddenly you don't feel as threatened, right? For most people, you just think, at most you think these are immoral or weird people, but people don't feel so threatened. But if you conjure up the image of people who look at these nude postcards that they circulate around poor working class neighborhoods, suddenly people get worked up. because the notion of working class population are the criminal population. You follow me so far? Okay. So the issue is not simply the medical message, the harmfulness, but to counter up people's stereotypes of what the consumers of it is like. But I don't want to push this too far, but don't. I mean, I know this is sensitive times, but I do want to relate to you this. Okay. Everybody know in the U.S. there is a group of undocumented immigrants who are Irish. It has been here for a long time. Now there's a small number. I have to give it to you. Okay, small number. There is a organization called Legalize the Irish in New York. Not this St. Patrick's Day, but before, many Irish prime minister came to U.S. Always make this proposal. How about legalize the Irish? Okay. So one time, if you Google it, you can find the picture. Okay. Hillary Clinton went to the Legalized Irish organization, take off their T-shirt that says Legalized Irish, and to smile with the picture over it. Okay. Honestly, I'm looking at it, I'm just thinking to myself, what if the T-shirt says Legalized the Mexicans? Would people feel the same way? I don't think she dare to put a T-shirt over it. That's political suicide. But if you put out Legalize the Irish, nobody cares that much. You can argue with a number of differences, but I would say, frankly, the question is, nobody denies undocumented immigrants is a problem. I don't think, as long as you think there's a border, there's a problem. The issue here is, would our public reaction be different if the undocumented immigrants look like us? That's the question, right? But anyway, so again, deviance can be a behavior, okay, an act, smoking marijuana. Deviance can be a person, okay. The person, you think about deviant, then it counteracts people's image. And deviance can be just a thought. This is a survey done in 2003. I know it's old. I would like to see the new ones. Okay. This is just 1 year after 9/11, I believe, or 2 years after 9/11. It was done in Minnesota. Okay. Ask people, I would disapprove if my child wanted to marry a member of the following groups. Which surprised me, honestly, a little bit. The most unpopular one would be atheists. That doesn't surprise me because even today you can see this. Okay? The most clear atheists. And then next to atheists be Muslim, right? So in this sense, the deviance is no longer what you do. The deviance is not who you are, but the deviance is basically your belief become a deviance, right? Just because you believe this, you're deviant. So that's the point I'm trying to put in here. Okay. So let's get to the proper concept here. So what's deviance for exam purposes? Remember, okay, for quiz purpose. Deviance is defined as violation of norms. Excuse me. Just never get over this. I hate it. Anyway, violation of norms. The norms means expectations, social expectations, right? Basically, we learned before. Norms are social expectations. So violation of social expectations are called deviance. Okay. Now, deviance has two kinds. Norms have two kinds. One is informal norms. One is formal norms. Informal norms are just people give you a bad look, or people shun you, that would be informal norms, right? But there are formal norms, would be law, legal, right? So deviance has two parts. Okay, for example, please remember this. Okay, two parts. So violation of norms, it can be a violation of informal deviance, basically a violation of things people feel annoying, offensive, or big no-no. But let's say extramarital affair. It's not illegal. You don't go to jail for it, but people usually give you a bad look. Okay, people have judgment on you, right? So that's it. In violation of informal norm, even though it's strong. Okay, and crime are violation of formal deviance, the violation of law, written down, right? So law would be basically, if I want to know what's crime, I took up Wisconsin or Illinois. They take a book, criminal statutes, I flip through them and see which one fits, right? So these are codified, written down, codified norms. Okay, enacted by the government. These are just social reactions, informal social reactions. So they are both deviance, but deviance here is a larger term concept, include both informal deviance and formal deviance. Everybody follow here so far? Okay. Sometimes you may have behavior that's illegal, but people do not care as much. Right? So if I got a traffic ticket, unless I get 10 of them in sequence, if I got only one traffic ticket, people say, well, but people don't usually put too much strong judgment. Right? You guys are probably a better driver. I have quite a few tickets, obviously. Okay. So now so you may have this issue, but people do not frown upon you. Okay. Or I'll give you another example. It just come to my mind right now. Okay. Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee, many people, even though Robert E. Lee, the Southern leader, okay, who fought for the Southern side, many people respect him a lot. He looks good and he looks dignified, in terms of the general, whatever. But honestly, legally, the guy committed treason, right? Literally treason. Treason is supposed to be the highest crime, highest level of crime in any definition, because I talked about this before. In the modern society, the highest authority is the state, right? You're fighting against the state. That's the highest level of crime. But the thing is, his behavior is illegal, but public reaction is not so much worse against it, negative against it, right? So the behavior may be criminal, but elicit less formal, informal sanctions. You may have more informal sanctions, but it may not be criminal, like extramarital affair, right? So that's the example I gave you. Everybody follow here so far? Okay. Now let me wrap up this by discussing the difference. Crime, violation of criminal codes. Deviance, violation of norms. How to know what is crime? You look at the criminal statutes enacted by the government. How do you know what's deviance? You look at public reactions. Do people frown upon it? Do people curse about it? Whatever. Okay. So that will be deviance. Okay. The two are sometimes together, sometimes they're different. Now, what is the concept used for? Crime, I would say, focus on the issue of harmfulness. Okay. That's why you have first degree murder, second degree murder, third degree murder. Right? Crime focus on harmfulness. Okay. If for most of you, I understand. If you want to study criminal justice, professional, whatever, for most people, the whole purpose is to control crime. Okay, and that, of course, you focus on the crime control issue. Okay, the person who study deviance tend to focus on justice and fairness issue. Okay, because you want to focus on the power struggles in defining society's moral boundaries. What's right, what's wrong. If I can put this in very simple terms, okay, in this class, let's say two people keep on chit-chatting, okay? I pick on you and say, please don't chit-chat anymore or whatever, okay? Now, on the one hand, based on the rule, you're not supposed to chit-chat. So that part, I'm focusing on the harmfulness, you may disrupt other people. But you can also say, there are a lot of people chit-chatting, why do you pick on me? You follow me so far? That will be the more sociological perspective. Why the teachers seem to pick on these two people, not the other people, right? And that will be the more sociological perspective to question the very assumption. So the example I put in here is marijuana use. So if you focus on crime issue, you focus on how marijuana can hurt the pregnancy or the future children. But if you look at the deviance issue, then why different states have different laws about legal status marijuana? So the two are asking different questions, focusing on different questions. Everybody follow me so far? Okay, so I hope this is clear. I'm going to quickly, oh, really? Okay. So, all right. Did I miss something? I didn't. Okay, let's just go through. So I'm going to say a few things about crime stats. Not difficult ones. They're very simple. Okay, but you do need to know them. Okay, the basics. Okay. Let me go here first before I get to this slide. I got a little bit not. Yeah. Okay. So in the US, generally speaking, when we want to know how much crime there is in the US, okay, and people see this on newspapers and TVs all the time, but generally speaking, I would say 90% of the times, the numbers you see are come from the FBI crime numbers. Okay, the FBI, just for common sense purpose, everybody should know. Okay, it's only quiz on exam. Okay, so for usually it's called an FBI uniform crime report. What does the number come from? I want you to know. Okay, it's coming from police stations. Okay, so I would say over 90% of the American police stations in the country, it's voluntary, cooperate with it. So each month, the number of people you arrested for all kind of crimes, okay, the people who are arrested, the amount of crimes you have cleared, which means you have ended in arrest, for example, okay, and I think that's the mainly two, okay. Then those numbers, then each month they report to FBI, and the FBI eventually put them together. So for your exam quiz purpose, I want you to know is, first of all, the most popular one is FBI Uniform Report, sometimes called UCR, okay. And that one is coming, the most important thing, it comes from the police. Okay, that's the most important thing. Okay. Now, but everybody knows a lot of times crimes are not reported, right? And what kind of crime usually not reported? I would say there are two kinds. One is rape, okay, sexual assault tend to have low under reporting. One of the reasons I would guess, from what I know, one of the reasons is these kind of sexual assaults tend to happen within people they know, okay, especially within the family. So reporting it or not, how to interpret the relation, the act often varies. So reporting tend to be low. Okay, that's one thing. So we know rape reports tend to be low, underestimated. The other thing I would say, property crime tend to be reported low because you all know this, I'm pretty sure. If you go to police stations, if you have a murder, aggregate assault, especially murder, okay, most police station, my understanding, most police station can solve murder like 70% of the murder, they can solve it. Okay, so because they're all the energy is on that. Okay, so murder tend to have high clearance rates, but for property crime, my understanding is on average probably 40% to 50% the most. Okay, because in other words, you report it, the chances are you'll never get it back. Okay. So a lot of people, unless you want to do a public service, just don't report. You understand so far? Okay. So what does that mean is, what that means is that if you only rely upon FBI number, police reports, you may underestimate a lot of other kind of crimes, right? The kind of rape and property crimes. Now, what can you do about it? US has another one called the National Victimization Survey. That one is, I think, started in the 1970s. Each year, they do about 7,000 people survey. I don't know if the federal employee cutting was, but up to now, every year they do this 7,000 people survey, okay, to figure out. Survey is asking you, not from the police, but from general population. In the past 12 months, have you been, and they give you all the lists of things, okay, victimized, burglarized, experienced this, experienced that, how many times. So basically, I have information from the police, I have information from the general population, which would include both reported and unreported cases. So far, then you can, if you remember chapter 2, you can false verify to evaluate its validity. Okay, did you measure what you try to measure? Okay, because you still remember chapter 2. Okay, so that would be, so everybody understand. So there's some crime reports, victimization reports. Okay, the two are from different sources. Okay, and then from 1989, actually the year I came to the US. Okay, so from 1989 They have a national crime incidence-based crime reporting system. That's right, incidence-based crime reporting system. What that means is this. Okay, let me tell you what happened. In the US, when you have FBI reports, let's say I come to your house, I burglarize, but I didn't realize you were actually at home. So you and I have an argument, we have an altercation, and through the altercation, somehow I get you killed. Okay, in the whole process. So in this case, there's a burglary, there's an aggravated assault, and then there is a murder. What is it? Okay, used to be in FBI members, they only count the called hierarchy rule. You only count the most serious one. So in that case, only murder happened here. Burglary and aggravated assault did not happen. Okay, that's the usual way to do it. Okay, that's why in 1989 they created a new set. Basically, it means within one incident, they will give you all the information happening within the incident. You find this so far? Okay. So give you all the information, then you have more comprehensive view. Let's say it's a woman, victim, or man offender. Okay. Most important, this is, take it, extremely important. Okay. For example, if I want to study whether using gun can defend yourself, you really want to know if the person attacking, did I put a gun in front of him before he attacked me or after he attacked me, right? You want to know the timing of it to determine whether gun makes a difference or not, right? And so with the third one, you have more detailed information what's going on within one crime incident. Everybody following me so far? Okay. So there are three sources. There's many more, but for our purpose, that's the most common one. The first one is from police, second one from victims, third one contain more details in one instance. Okay. The summary purpose. Anybody has some thoughts, comments on this so far? By the way, I think everybody, actually, I do have a quick question on this. Your textbook talk about this. Most sociologists these days tend to use homicide as a way to look at crime waves. They don't use others. Why? Because homicide tend to be more reliable. Okay, if there's a dead body over there, it's difficult to lie. Right? Others tend to be more subjective, depends on reporting. Right? So most people tend to use homicide. And it happens, homicide rates going up and down do tend to correlate with other crimes. So then we just use homicide because it's much more reliable. Okay, it's different, people less likely to lie with it. But let me just give you this. Where's the? Don't forget. Let me give another one. U.S. homicide rates, just for knowledge sake, everybody should know this. U.S. homicide rate has two peaks. You can see here, right? One is 1930s, right? Al Capone, you know the time that the robber barons. Okay, and then there's a second peak, late 1980s, early 1990s. Okay, second peak, the crack cocaine epidemic. Okay, turf wars between drug lords. Okay, that's a two. Right now, we are living in one of the low crime times. Okay, lucky us, okay, for the moment at least. Okay. So, everybody has some thoughts, comments on this so far? Now, having said all this, bear with me. I need to introduce the concept of crime rate. Okay, so we know the three sources. We know people use homicide rate as a way to evaluate this. Right now, textbook and everybody talk about crime rates. I do want to talk about this because I want people to have a correct understanding of what that means. Okay. Now, so crime rates is defined as the number of crimes divided by the number in the population. So think about Milwaukee. Let's say Milwaukee has 6,000 violent crime cases in a year. Then you divide by the Milwaukee's population. You multiply by 100,000. Why do you multiply by 100,000? Anybody knows the reason? because the population is so big, the number of crimes so few. When you calculate, when you divide it, it's like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, so you multiply by 100,000 to make the number look bigger, to make more sense. Okay, so that's so that the definition of crime rate is the number of crimes per 100,000 population. It's the same thing people use to talk about suicide. Yeah. So 11 suicide per 100,000 population. Okay, that's the same thing people talk about this. I do want to make sure everybody understands. I have exam questions, quiz questions. People often make mistake of it. Okay. The key thing is number of crime. Remember, it's not the number of criminals. Okay, because a place may have high crime. It doesn't mean the place has a lot of criminals, because it could be one person committing most of the crime. Do you follow me so far? Okay, so always be careful. Don't confuse crime with criminals. Okay, a lot of time, everybody knows this. Most crimes are committed by a small number of people. Okay, in fact, in the local place as well. Okay, so I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Okay, let me show you the logic of what's going on. Okay, I'm not good at math. I'm just going to show you the logic of this. Okay, so imagine you have these two. Okay, let's see if I remember. Okay, okay. So there's the number of crimes divided by the number of criminals. If you do this way, correct me if I'm not bad. If you do this way, you'll find out how many crimes each criminal commits. Right? How many crimes each criminal commits. And then you can have the number of criminals divided by the number in the population. You can find out in this population how many criminals are there. You know so far? Now, look at what sociologists do. Sociologists do this criminal crossed out. So eventually you end up with number of crimes per 100,000 population. What does that mean? It means sociologists do not deal with criminals. Okay? In other words, you don't talk about individual criminals. You don't talk about something called criminality, which means a person, how much crime this person is a hardcore criminal, for example. Okay? Just seldom talk about that in sociology. Okay. So in other words, we don't focus on individual criminals. We focus on the number of crimes per 100,000 population. Do you really follow me so far? Okay. Just the logic, make sure you understand. Okay. If you are in psychology, I guarantee you they probably will focus on these two issues. Okay. Why this criminal commits so many more crimes? The other only commit one, for example. Okay. Then why this population has so many more criminals? The other one has fewer. Those were questions I think psychologists dealing with. Everybody follow so far? Okay. So, but again, I want to make sure everybody understands what crime rate means. Is everybody following here so far? In the middle of the day, I know it's okay. So, one last thing I want to say. Not last thing yet. What? Okay, yeah, we have. Now, that's good because I need to finish as soon as I can. Now, the FBI has been using this for a long time. I'm happy that they no longer use it, but many other activist organizations still use it. At the risk of offending people here, people have this talk, people care about suicide, people who care about sexual assault, people care about domestic violence. They constantly use this kind of way to think about things, which I think, to be honest, is junk statistics. Okay, let me just say the reason why. Okay. FBI has been doing this for many years, up to 2018, as far as I know. Okay. On their site, you can see this. Okay. Basically, they will tell you a violent crime occurs every 26 seconds. A property crime happens every 4 seconds. A murder happens every 30 minutes, pretty much. It makes you scared. Okay. It makes you feel like, what can I do? Right. The reason why we say it's junk is because everybody knows crime is not evenly distributed in time and space. Right. So put this way, today, just say this way. Today, if you think about juvenile delinquency, let's say about 3 o'clock. Do you think juvenile delinquency in this place going to be higher before 3 o'clock or after 3 o'clock? Do you think crime will, especially young people's crime, will go up during this time or after 3 o'clock? I'm pretty sure after. Why? Because people are in school. When suddenly there's no, people are not in school, people are outside, there's more likely to have criminal delinquency, right? So it also, if you look at all the crime reports, most of them seem to happen at night. I told my wife, we have been in the US such a long time, we never experienced much crime at all. One of the major reasons is because we're extremely boring people. We just never go out at night. I mean, it's, on the one hand, we never have life. On the other hand, we're safe, right? The issue is because most crime happen in that area, right? And crime doesn't happen, crime is not evenly spread out around each day. It's not evenly spread out on the seasons, and also places everybody knows. Even if you go to inner cities, okay, everybody knows there are certain places you avoid, other places are fine. Okay, the thing is, there's local knowledge. It's that the issue is that this calculation is assuming crime is evenly distributed. Because of this, they just have what? The number of crimes, they have how many minutes in a year, and you divide it. Let's look at this number. Okay. It's a junk because it assumes things happen evenly, right? So I'm not trying to say crime clock is always wrong, but I would say for domestic violence, for many other things, I would first question is the assumption that is spatially and temporally evenly distributed or not. If you're not, then the number is not. Yeah. However, domestic violence, for example, okay, you can show me that it happens in all kinds of families, both rich, middle, and poor. Then it's possible, right? Then it's possible. Yeah. Anyway, just want to say this. Okay. All right. Anybody has some thoughts, comments on this so far? Feel free. Okay. All right. So let's get to the other one. I know. I hope you're. Well, because I do want to finish as much as I can. Let me try to make sure that my recording is there, okay? Because where's my recording? Where's Teams? Is this Teams? No. Just give me a second. I think this is Teams. Yeah, let me share the right thing. Okay, I just, because it happens all the time. I couldn't record correctly. So now I have biological. Okay, so let me try to share again. Share window or tab. Why it's not? No. Just 1 second. No. Wow, it's not showing this. Oh yeah, entire screen. Okay, I got it. Okay, now I'm showing it. Now, I will start. So we discussed crime and deviance concepts. The crime stats, sources, that what's crime rate. And now I'm going to focus on the biological, psychological perspective. Okay, as quickly as I can. Okay, I'm not a biologist, psychologist, but the general perspective. Okay. Now, biological, psychological perspective started just for knowledge's sake with Cesar Lambrasso. Okay, I put in a picture there. The guy, with serious look. He was a Italian physician. Okay, in the 18th century, so Italian army physician. So he had access to a lot of corpses. So he dissects all these corpses, and he knows who has criminal record, who doesn't have criminal record. Okay, and lo and behold, he actually wrote in his writing that way, like he said, it's like a light shining on his brain. He had a revelation, and just based on the comparisons. Okay, and he says he found out criminals tend to be deformed. Okay, what that means is they have extra toe, extra fingers, or their ears are more pointed, their jaws more, bigger, whatever. Okay, so he has this notion. Okay. Honestly, don't just laugh. He just give you some evidence to show this. Okay. The issue here, no, of course, nobody takes him seriously these days. Nobody knows that. Nobody says it's deformity. Okay. Frankly, there's a reason for this. If crime, as defined by the government, is mostly in the working class population, working class population have a lower nutrition level, hard work, then of course it has a erosive effect on your physics, right? That doesn't surprise me now. Okay. However, the major contribution of Cesar Lambrasso is not somehow people are deformed. Okay. Its major contribution is his change. I think he's the first person who started to see crime issue not as a moral issue, but as a medical issue or a biological issue. I think that's the major transition over there. Okay, where previously, I should say this: American criminal justice system is built on what I usually call rational choice principle. Basically, people have free will. People choose to commit a crime based on cost and benefit analysis, and then therefore they only themselves are solely responsible for the conduct they did. That's American criminal justice system, right? So if you want to control crime, you want to make sure crime punishment swift, certain, proportional, so that criminals, when they do the calculation, they will not make that bad choice. Right? That's the system is built that way. Okay? But Cesar Lambrasso began to argue the other way. Essentially, he's arguing that crime is no longer simply a free will, rather is crime may be a deformed mind, okay, a medical issue. They are out of their own control. It's not they choose to do so, but they are choosing under a delusion. Right? Found this so far? Okay. That's basically the argument. Okay. The way he put it, okay, the original term he put it is, I think it's atavistic, okay, or in today people's term is evolutionary throwbacks. So this is the time when Charles Darwin was came into scene. Okay, so people think people have evolution, and then his idea is everybody evolved, but some are left over. They didn't evolve together with us, so they become the criminals. Okay, so that's the basic notion behind his idea. Okay, but the key thing I think to understand is criminals, or I here, criminal sick people, they do not have too much free will to choose. Okay. I would say this started with the biological perspective and psychological perspective that eventually nowadays turns into you can look at young children by the age of 3 to predict what they're going to become in the future. So essentially turning into this way. Okay. Now, the second person who came in to show is a person by the name William Sheldon. Okay. William Sheldon disagrees. He doesn't think it's because of deformities. He thinks it's has to do with body type. So now, never again, don't laugh if people. Actually, William Sheldon's argument, I think today many people still buy into it. Okay, the understanding he studied tens of thousands professors and college students with prisoners comparing. Okay, and he found out. So anybody have heard of these terms before? Mesomorphs, ectomorphs, and mesomorphic. Okay, so the time they were thinking is people have different body types. Okay, of course, in college we all have different body types, but they're trying to find an average, a median. Okay, so he found out. He argues that the ectomorphs, thin and lean, different people, and then endomorphs, tend to be a little bit overweight. And then the one is athletic body type. The argument is criminal population tend to concentrate. You get it? I'm pretty sure you know the mesomorphic body type, the athletic body type. Okay. So if you want to draw a criminal profile, okay, where's the criminal profile? Then the criminal profile would be males, because we know males tend to have more crimes than females. That's for sure. Okay. And we also know age-wise, it must be between about 15 to 24. So if this room, I'll pick up people who are male, who are aged 15, 24, and people with athletic. You follow this? That would be the profile, right? And this is early psychology. It's not, honestly, those days, we do this still. I mean, if you don't know the person's personality, sometimes we look at a person's look, right? I mean, the person look like an extrovert, the person look like an introvert. Just, people make this judgment, so that's the early psychology, essentially, okay? Today's psychology, let me wrap it up in today's psychology a little bit here, okay? I would say today's psychology focus primarily on the issue of self-control. Okay. Basically, self-control means, I can give you a list. They have a questionnaire to check your own self-control. I know my self-control is bad. Okay, I know that. Okay, I don't know how else you can do. Okay, but by the way, I just want to say this. Everybody understands self-control is not uniform. In other words, you may have self-control in your academics, but it doesn't mean you have self-control for eating chocolates. It means there are two. You see a lot of professors super smart, but it's two different things. It doesn't mean you have self-control. You learn error equals on every place. Okay. So now the issue of self-control probably started with the issue of that people discuss Phineas Gage. Anybody heard about this case? Phineas Gage, the guy, it is a remarkable thing. Okay, just read. Okay, I think it's 1920 or something. He set up an explosive in a railroad place. He was the person responsible for setting it up. And during those days, I think explosives include a lot of the iron things inside. And when it explodes, he didn't run away fast enough. That rod, let me make it bigger so you can see it. Okay. That rod went, went from here and goes out through there. The guy stood up and went home, walked home. It's hard to believe. Okay? He walked home, but the testimony says his personality changed. Okay, from a more nice, jovial person to a nasty person. Okay? To put a long story short. Okay? And the reason behind this, people argue, is the frontal lobe damage. I'm pretty sure everybody heard about this, but the frontal lobe is where I'm bad at this, but you can teach me more. I think the front is basically regulating your rational thoughts, how smart you are. Okay, the back part somehow regulates your emotions. That generally speaking. Okay, so now the argument is frontal lobe damage. Okay? There are a lot of studies of these kind of things. Okay? I don't want to give too much details on this. And also they look at your, people call it autonomic nervous system. You know what that means? It's basically those things that regulate your heartbeat, for example. Okay? You sleep, you cannot control it. It's just heartbeat going up, right? So they think these are things people are wired differently, essentially saying. Okay? So in this case, the frontal lobe damage could affect a person's self-control ability. I say self-control, then they use different ways to look at what affects self-control. Right? So lower automatic nervous system, and psychopaths would be another case. I don't know if I ever told you this before, but so what you do is, let's say, I let two people watch a extremely graphic, violent video. Extremely graphic video. I can't even think about it. Okay, but anyway, and none of you have watched before. I have two people watching it. I wire you up into some kind of electrodes, and afterwards I can look at how much you sweat and how much your heart beats. Right from so far? Okay. As everybody understands, it's supposed to be, if you are normal people, you look at these graphic scenes, usually we begin to sweat a little, our heartbeat keep up, okay, going up. But the psychopaths supposed to be, they remain pretty much calm. Okay, they just don't naturally sweat. Basically, what that means is they would need extra stimulus to feel the same excitement that we do. So far, okay, usually we call thrill seekers, essentially. Yeah, but that's and psychopaths are put, what's his name again? It's Hannibal, right? Yeah, you can see, you can put your name in the Harry Potter one, what's his name? Voldemort, you can put it there, okay? And all kinds of people, right? Now, the psychopaths are the people I like here, know the lyrics, don't feel the music. They seem to, psychopaths are very different than most other criminals. Most other criminals, I'll be honest with you, we know this for sure. most common animals tend to be, how do I put it, dumb, okay, not the brightest, So, but psychopaths are not. Psychopaths are people usually are very charismatic, very charming, and they're quite intelligent. There are few, not many of them, very few. Even among prison populations, I think the estimate is about 1% at most. Okay, very few. And so far, as far as my knowledge goes, we don't know how psychopaths can be treated. From my knowledge, you can search for this. Okay, and I'm pretty sure they exist not only in prisons; they probably exist in in government as well. I just put this. Okay, I don't need to stereotype, but psychopaths are these kind of people. But so think about the people you think about. Okay, they can be extremely charming, very intelligent. Okay, but just they don't feel the same way you feel. Okay, essentially. That's psychopaths, and then you have paranoid schizophrenia. Everybody know what paranoid schizophrenia is? Right? Yeah. So you are imagining things, and you're imagining people are attacking. There are cases where I think there's a school shooting instance. There's a boy. They call him every time he goes to drink water. He will always look back and feel somebody's going to attack him. Okay. But these are people paranoid schizophrenia. But all three of them, I would say, connected to the issue of lower a person's self-control. Okay. So today, let me put it this way. One of the most popular, most powerful theories in social science, so in criminology these days, I think, is if you want only one thing to explain everything, okay, which is tricky, I think self-control is the one. Okay. People who have lower self-control would have noticed the term, okay? It's predisposition. It doesn't mean you're going to be complaint trial, but you have the predisposition to do that. Okay. Just like if your parents, your grandparents have always been alcoholic, you have the predisposition to be alcoholic. But then it depends on whether the environment release that predisposition. Depends so far. Okay, but still, those were the things they were talking about. Okay. Psychologists, I think, focus a lot about this. And besides, let me see what time is it. Go over time. Okay, I'll just another thing I didn't mention, just very quickly. Two things. First of all, there's a term that's been going through social science these days. The term is called the medicalization of deviance. Medicalization of deviance essentially is discussing a process, a phenomenon, where previously they think it's a moral issue, turning into medical issue. This has been a trend. I can honestly imagine a future where there's a pill for everything. Honestly, okay. That's honestly, I'm not joking. I think there's a future like that. Okay. Basically, so you have, you've heard the term kleptomania, right? If you have shoplifting issues, and you may have ADHD if you have problem behavior issues, and a person likes to watch porn, they become sex addicts, that kind of thing, right? No, so they become medical issues. So in other words, they are perceived as things not within human control, not within free will, but it's more within the medical professions. Okay, there's a long trend of that. I'll be honest with you, I feel sociology is a yielding field to psychologists. Psychology, psychiatry, and that kind of trend. Okay. But so that's called the medicalization of deviance. What happened is this. Okay, I'm going to end with this last one. I'll let you go. Okay. What happened is in 1960s, before 1960s, we have a lot of mental hospitals. If you put a mental health patients into mental hospitals. After 1960s, US has a movement called the deinstitutionalization movement. What happened is that we discovered medication that can treat schizophrenia. And we also noticed in places like Soviet Union, okay, this is Cold War time, they always tell people who are political dissidents as mentally ill. So US, we don't want to label people as just mentally ill because they have different opinion, okay? And also now we have medication. So the solution to that is how about we close the mental hospitals just simply making sure they take medication. That'll be it. We don't have to lock them up. So with that, we have a whole national movement closing down mental hospitals. It's called the deinstitutionalization movement. The movement has a lot of criticism because of this. There are conservatives can argue because of this, then you have more people on the street committing crimes who tend to be mentally ill patients. So there's I think the discussion is ongoing, how to bring this back or not, and how to achieve the balance. Because I used to talk about this, students get mad at me because saying I'm a stereotype